What is one thing about the world that surprises you?
I think it surprises me that the world is not more dysfunctional than it is. Because I feel like we are just so like we're messed up, right? Like there's so many cognitive biases and all sorts of things that we perceive that are not actually true, and we don't have clear ways of thinking, and emotions biases and all kinds of other things biases. And I'm just very surprised that a whole bunch of these individual humans that are so broken have managed to come together, to look around us, right? Everything that exists, like all this stuff around us, buildings, technology, culture, like just everything, like this whole, yeah, all of humanity is so complex and so rich and so intriguing. And to some extent stuff actually functions, right? Like water shows up and electricity shows up, and like I'm able to chat with you and we're able to record it and put it online. And it's just crazy that all of these things are functional. Of course there is a lot of existing dysfunction, but the fact that it's not more, I think, surprises me given how broken humans are. Yeah.
Maybe there's a certain robustness to chaos that you do not give it enough credit for.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
What is one thing about the world that surprises you?
Yeah, I guess just the fact that intelligent systems exist at all, just, I mean, evolution is an amazing thing, and it's produced us. And it seems very improbable, but again, it's just not of a human scale that you can conceive of, the amount of time and the amount of trial and error that went into developing, the human organism. But just the fact that we exist, and that which is why, again, I've always been excited by AI, because it seems, the most surprising thing is that intelligent systems exist at all. And so, I've always had a broader interest in cognitive science, and not just viewing AI as helping us build interesting technology that makes life easier and makes the world a better place, which of course I believe in, but also that it helps us understand this fundamental mystery, which is, intelligent systems to begin with. And how can you have a physical world that supports this sort of information processing that can do these amazing things and change the world?
And what is one thing about the world that surprises you?
I think that like the way that the new normal can set in, I think, is pretty surprising, in the sense of, we've been in lockdown for a year. I haven't been to the office for a year now. And, yeah, it's been a change, but it also, I don't know, within 6 months became the new normal. And it's just kind of like, this is the routine now. I wake up, I go to my desk in the next room, and this is where I sort of spend my days, and this is what my job is now. It's very different from what it was before, but it's not something I don't know, it's not something I think about often of, oh, isn't this weird that this is what my job is now? It's just like, no, this is just sort of how things are now. And that seems to happen a lot, I guess, of just like,
Yeah. I mean, like a year or two ago, if you had considered majority of people or majority of organizations considering remote work, that would be surprising. But 6 months from now or a year from now, it would not be surprising for organizations to just voluntarily choose that. And not, it is interesting how hysteresis thresholding is sort of a very real phenomenon.
mm-hmm.
And what is one thing about the world that surprises you?
Oh yeah, I mean, like the work that I find it really surprising how people are very, I don't know, like not compassionate about other people, in a sense that I don't know, sometimes, let's say there are some situations where some people were taken advantage of by other people, and then once in a while, what I see is that the larger portion than I expected of the population actually do tend to stand by next to someone who took advantage of the other, and who often have a bigger power or better off. And in my opinion, whenever there is some kind of conflict happens between two groups of people or two people in particular, and then when the details are murky, or there could be some debatable points about this conflict, I feel like the default stance that we should take, or at least I strive to take, is to stand next to the people who are like underrepresented, or the generally socially disadvantaged. But what I always find very surprising and a bit sad as well is that it turned out that this is not necessarily held by majority of people. In fact, the majority of people that I see, hopefully it is because the news articles tends to emphasize things that are worse about the world. Majority of people tend to actually stand by next to rich people, like the better off people and the better represented people. So that's the thing that surprises me and also makes me sad about the world.
What do you? Yeah, it is unfortunate. What is one thing about the world that surprises you?
One thing about the world, yeah, there are a lot of things. So this pandemic was like super surprising. I never expected something happens like in 2020 that can shut down the entire world for actually it's more than a year now. For more than a year. That was surprising, and the thing that's more surprising, there are some other fields that are harder than AI. So they can so there's producing vaccine and so on. So these are not easy things to do, and so they're
Wait, you were surprised about the existence of fields that are harder than AI?
Yeah.
I see.
So their input is not clear, like their model is not clear, their processor is not clear, and their output is not clear. At least in AI, so we have some of these like fixed, so we know about them. So that was kind of surprising. Yeah.
I see. Makes sense. What is one thing about the world that surprises you?
Well, I don't know how to say this exactly, but it always surprises me when like horrific things happen, when people choose to do, choose to be really like horrible to each other. And I usually try my best to like, it's so bothersome to me that I have to try and figure out like, what was that person thinking? How could they get to that point to do that? And sometimes you just can't understand. Sometimes you try to, but that's something I think I will always kind of struggle with. Probably a lot of other people do too as well.
But just as a intellectual curiosity question, sounds like you don't ascribe to the veneer theory, which is that all of human niceties are just a thin veneer over that if you put humanity in a conflict, and then they will show you what they really care about.
No, I do not. I'm probably the exact opposite. Is I generally believe that most people kind of want similar things. They want, like, most people kind of want a nice life, and I don't think people are innately want to treat each other poorly, or see, like, in the worst case, see people as less than people. But through different exposure to ideas, beliefs, and about how to get to that goal of a nice life for you and those very close to you that you really believe are, worthy of that nice life, and also what you've been taught to believe about, other people around you. Between those two, I think it can lead to like the horrific behaviors that we see.
Makes sense.
And what is something about the world that surprises you?
It's interesting how bad we are. I'm going to say at making predictions with sort of high confidence. So here's my theory about what's going to happen climate-wise over the next 50 years.
Yeah, let's hear it.
There's going to be a single sort of soliton-like event, right? So something bad will happen. Greenland will start to shift, and then the whole thing will slip off, right? And then, almost COVID style, there will be a massive turnaround of human activity, and humans will sort themselves out somehow, right? We have such high confidence when we say, oh, humans can't, you can't expect humans to change, I don't know, live underground or whatever it is, move all their houses away in 2 generations. And yet I have something now which I call the best graph. You can find it later and insert it. This is Hans Rosling. It's from Hans Rosling, but it's an easy graph to find. Human fertility rate over the last 100 years dropped from 5 to 2. Okay. So humans have 2.5 times fewer children now than they did 100 years ago. Now, obviously, there's a bunch of other stuff, right? So child mortality dropped. So there's like reason to, but that bare number, and that's worldwide, right? That's sort of ignoring that's mixing richer, poor, developed. That fundamental claim, humans could drop their fertility rate, something fundamental about them, by 2.5x, and it's, I mean, the 2.5x, the 2x reduction, the quickest 2x reduction is probably over 20-30 years, from the 40s to the 70s. So I think humans are just remarkably malleable, changeable, and we don't give the humans credit for that. So yeah. Clearly, if all humans decided to further reduce their reproduction rate, the planet would be in great shape. The humans wouldn't be for a while, but the planet would be.
The humans are remarkably malleable, yet remarkably unaware of their own malleability.
Yes, and remarkably confident that the one thing you can't do is change human nature. So an ambitious. You sometimes see somebody saying, "Here's my ambitious plan to reduce air travel." Right, and I think that if you follow my ambitious plan, you'll reduce air travel by 15% over the next 10 years. Right, and to me, that's not an ambitious plan. Right, that's nothing. Right, an ambitious plan is 5x over the next 10 years. Right, what does that plan look like? I don't know. Right, it's got to be something to do with video conferencing. But whatever that plan is, and so we say ambitious, and then we say tiny numbers. And again, I think we're just forgetting how malleable humans can be.
And what is one thing about the world that surprises you?
I mean, since COVID, like I feel that every day it's like, oh wow, like but yeah, I mean, I feel that the interaction with people, there's always surprising things that happen. Different mindsets. I think that, I don't know how many people have traveled to sort of outside of city centers in the US, but to me, that's always shocking when I, drive off in the Midwest, middle of nowhere, like seeing how drastic people change and their lives are, like how different it is. That is shocking to me.
What is something about the world that surprises you? Besides, obviously, the fact that it doesn't move as fast.
It's 1.5x, yeah. What surprises me? Anything out of the expectation surprises me.
Okay, yeah, I think beyond the definition of surprise.
I think people surprise me a lot. So I think it's this thing in my mind, which I don't like about myself, but basically I have these models for people and I am like updating these models, but I always have models. And if people act outside of that model, which, happens every now and then, I get very surprised by those actions again.
Yeah, I think you just like in more words defined the definition of surprise again. Except this time you took the pains to define P of X as well.
Exactly.
Okay. Do you find do you find your models of people violated frequently?
I mean, yeah, more frequent than you would think, like once a week or something happens and I'm like, I didn't expect that person to do that.
Okay. So that is surprising. So the world surprises you because they just keep violating your models of
Yeah. Because I think, nobody fits in models. That's like the robotics agenda, right?
Yeah. What is something about the world that surprises you?
A lot of things surprise me, but I actually am surprised at people who can be content, in the sense that they can be content sort of this business of, again, going back to this previous thing that we're talking about. I mean, in Hindu philosophy, this business of just staring into the world and reaching moksha, whatever is considered to be a good thing. And I can't, for the life of me, understand how anybody can do that. And there are some people who could do that, some people who are like essentially just able to be completely content with everything to the level of not being animated to do anything. That the fact that, so that surprised me. So actually a much bigger issue to me, and I keep saying it to my students, is the thing that's eternally fascinating to me about people is their reward metric. Because all of us, I mean, again, the cheesy AI metaphors, it's all over my life. And so, it's some random, reinforcement learning in DECFORM DP is what you're doing. If you think of that as life, then the thing that's interesting to me is we more or less have the same observability of the world. We have more or less the same capabilities. The thing that's most interesting is what's your reward metric. And it's this internal reward metric. And that, I think that when I'm trying to understand people, I'm trying to understand their reward metric. And everybody has a different reward metric. And it's just fascinating to see the differences. I mean, of course, the ones that are closest to me, my wife and I, I always do this analysis in my own head. If I do it loud, I'm sure she would throw me out. But so this idea that we all have very different reward metrics, and the fact that that's something that I think it's just very surprising to me. And I actually remember, I was telling this to somebody the other day, I actually remember the first time realizing this. I mean, it's known that kids come into this world thinking that the body is connected to the universe and that there's no difference between them and the universe. And then they get out of that, and until 15 months or so, they think that their preferences, their reward metric is the same as everybody else's reward metric. And around 3-4 years, they realize that even their beliefs are different from everybody else. And that's when we become fully human. We can tell lies, we can
theory of mind develops.
Right? Yeah, the whole thing. But having one is that realizing it, the other is like consciously realizing it and analyzing it. And I remember actually I was in sort of elementary school or something when I suddenly remember thinking, yeah, everybody actually has different lives. So for some strange reason, I was thinking about it. What if everybody wants the person I might want? And apparently I was thinking very forward looking to see, who might I want to get married to. And What if everybody is interested in them? And then one of the things that was suddenly kind of dawned on me is you don't need to worry. Everybody has different lives. It's not like the universe is competing with you. And that's actually a very beautiful thing, because I think the world works because we all have different reward metrics. And I think enjoying that and respecting that, to me, is extremely important. I mean, I may not have your reward metric. I may not know how to live my life with your reward metric. But why am I glad that you are there? Because I think the world works because we all have very different reward metrics. I mean, there are some manifold, I'm sure, but they're different enough that that's what makes the world work. And that's interesting to me.
Do you think you'll get there at that point where you are also not chasing anything?
I don't think so. I I don't know. I mean, I still don't think I would get there. I would be even more categorically, no, I won't get there some years back, but still, I think even now, I still don't see that I will ever get there. I just don't understand that. Again, it's part of reward metric in some weird sense, right? So I think, in a weird way, I'm both extremely content with what I have, and I'm also extremely insecure at not extremely, but somewhat insecure. And I think that animates all of us. I think if I don't feel at all insecure about anything, there are a whole bunch of things that I no longer care about. One more conference paper doesn't matter to me anymore. This was, by the way, I'm sorry to tell this, but this sort of a thing is crazy for me. But so I have nightmares. And everybody has nightmares, right? So about things that are failed, that you're doing bad at it. So for the longest time when I was a kid, I used to have this nightmare that I will go to a class and then there's an exam in progress. I haven't prepared.
Yep.
Right? Everybody has this. And in fact, I remember there was this one book I read where he said that, people have nightmares only about things that are somewhat good at. And so maybe I thought maybe I'm actually good at taking exams. That's why I was having nightmares. So after my first nightmare, my last exam was over, before PhD comes or something, then I thought, okay, this will stop. It did stop. I no longer have those nightmares. And then I started having nightmares about there was a conference deadline and there was a conference talk to be given and I was not prepared. So I seamlessly transitioned into that. And for a while that went on. And I no longer think that critical, those are that critical, I'm okay with them. So my continuing nightmare is I go to the class unprepared. It still happens. It's just even now, it's like, it's just basically, so I think it's like you care about different things. You will have your insecurity. It's not that the same exact thing that was bothering you will bother you now. I no longer care about an extra conference paper, but something else will take its place. And if nothing takes its place, then full contentment means there's no animation. So there's no force animating you. At that point, you have much less interest in. So yeah, I don't think I will get there, and B, if I do, then presumably I would be somewhat surprised and saddened. But so. Yeah.
Well, your story has this very interesting life cycle of an academic. I can imagine a classroom where the student is showing up with recurring nightmares of coming in unprepared, and the instructor is coming out.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, they don't. Yeah, I mean, I think it's like we all basically care about the things that are bothering us at that point of time. They don't necessarily think what you have to deal with in terms of But I mean, I do believe that your insecurities and your nightmares tell you, and this is where I read this in some book and I somehow stuck with me, that I never, for example, have a nightmare that I suddenly went onto the basketball court and I wasn't dribbling the ball right, or I was missing my shot. Because I'm so bad at basketball that it's not even, the mind doesn't even bother having nightmares on that.
Also, presumably, it's fairly off policy. You don't play basketball frequently enough for
possibly, yeah. I mean, even the things that I do, but I do badly, I don't have nightmares about. I think, in fact, the interesting thing, a way to kind of, at least this sort of helps me, a way to convince yourself, the way to see this is you only have nightmares about things that you actually have. You can be a contender. You have a fighting chance. And most of us don't have a fighting chance on most things in life, because it's just very, very different things. So a few things that have a fighting chance at are the ones I might have nightmares and insecurities. So yeah, so it's surprising. Why don't we all feel depressed that we are not great basketball players or we are not this thing? It's great because somehow A, the capabilities, and B, the rewards just co-evolve together, I think. So yeah.
And what is one thing about the world that surprises you?
I've seen a lot of surprising things in the recent times. I didn't realize, well, this is more on the negative end, but I was going to start with something positive. I guess all this mask wearing and how people either don't want to do it or want to do it, or they think they want to do it, but can't for some reason figure out how to do it. And it's already been a year and people can't figure out how to wear a mask properly. That really surprises me and really disappoints me. I think I've lost a lot of my faith in humanity, which I'm really not happy about, because one of my favorite part about going to day trips near Pittsburgh was just to be around other people and kind of immersed in, a general ambiance of, just going to places where there's other people, like parks or whatever. And now I feel like I'm not sure I want to be around other people as much, not at least people that I don't, know, because I'm just highly disappointed with how selfish people have been with like insisting on not wearing masks, or again, pretending they want to wear a mask, but not doing it very carefully, not very properly. But that's on the more negative end. And I remember a few months ago, my husband and I went to Lowe's to get something from Lowe's. We try to avoid going to stores in person if we can. And I was surprised by people just openly now wearing masks inside the store. And what my husband said was, well, I'm actually surprised by how many people weren't wearing masks. So I try to follow that perspective. Just actually being glad that on average, people are caring about others and wearing their masks and so on. Not that mask wearing is, the only thing about a person that I should care about, but it's just kind of a very visible, I think, way to understand how someone thinks that hasn't been as accessible before. And yeah, I guess I don't know if the results are encouraging or discouraging. So far I've been kind of discouraged, but I feel like very soon I'm going to regain my faith in people, just because I don't like not liking people.
And you think that is empirically justified, regaining that faith in?
No, it's not. It's not. I'm still going to do it.
Okay.
Just because I'd rather be happy and liking people than not liking people.
Fair enough. That makes sense. And what is something about the world that surprises you?
So I guess the recent political trend I found surprising. I didn't see this coming. Like I think I tend to be somebody who really strongly believes in freedom of speech, but I've come to see that, that maybe there's a limit to this. Like maybe there's dangers to people saying things, and that's always been the case. But that I think has, recent political events has taken me a bit by surprise that maybe we need to rethink these things as a society. Like I feel like I'm very much a child of the this liberal Western kind of point of view, and I'm kind of questioning that to a certain extent, that maybe there's limits to that. And yeah, that part has been surprising to me, that I've been thinking along these lines, I guess. Yeah.
Hmm. Do you think that's a natural progression of generations, that there's this trend that young people tend to lean a lot more left, and as you grow up you tend to become a bit more socially conservative, and I wonder if this is...
Yeah, I don't know, actually. I feel like
I don't feel like I've become more conservative. I don't view this as conservatism necessarily. I feel like I've always been right where I am. I could be wrong about that, but so I don't think so. I mean, you know, I'm in a family where I am probably the most conservative person here, but I'm used to that actually. I was a bit like that growing up as well. So, but I mean, I'm not a very conservative person. I'm just around people that I would regard as fairly left wing. So, which is fine. But I tend to be more. Let's say I tend to have more like, let's say, libertarian tendencies, if you like, but not, you know, not in any way. Like, let's say you have to, for a Canadian living in Quebec, living in the plateau, in Montreal, in Quebec, I'm a little bit on that side, but you have to, there's a context.
Yeah, there's a context.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what is something about the world that surprises you?
The whole world? Yeah.
Not in any particular sphere that you wanted. Well, you find yourself or have found yourself in the past go, this is bizarre. Like, why is this set up this way? Or why does, you know?
Yeah. I think that sometimes like teaching in kind of like somewhat like elite institutions seems very strange to me. Like, I really don't get why college costs so much, or it like is so important that people kind of agree to go here or apply in something. Like, I guess I've always like, I have a kind of open source mentality, and I've always just thought like there should be some system where if you want to take a course, you can take a course and see it. So that always felt extremely strange to me. I realize it's kind of naive, but and I realize that kind of credentialing is kind of a huge aspect of the system. But I would love to see something take off that makes it plausible to kind of get an education without paying the kind of extreme amount of money in the US.
Yeah, and it feels like we went through a little bit of phase in the early 2010s with the Coursera's of the world and the Udacities of the world, and there was a spark there that maybe that can replace or at least broaden participation. Do you see that? Like, it never quite, or at least so far, it hasn't panned out to its initial ambitious sort of motivations. Do you see that world happening?
Yeah, so when I was a graduate student, I had the chance to TA a Coursera course, which is really fun. And yeah, we had like, I don't know, 50,000 people sign up for the course. Probably about 5% actually finished it or did enough of it. It was neat, but it tends to be people who are extremely on top of it and like really can kind of really focus or have the time to really focus on a course that they pull through. I tend to think that maybe the model is not going to look exactly like a course, but something slightly different. I'm always impressed by people who make videos on YouTube or things like that, who try to kind of find an in for teaching material in a new way. I don't know though. I mean, it might need to be something more. I mean, people often talk about how education is not just courses; it's a whole experience and a whole kind of dedication.
What is something about the world that surprises you?
Yeah, I think an honest answer there is the amount of talent and resources that we devote to things that are just utterly bad for us, like as a species, right? Like, I love snack food, but I don't think we need a team of food scientists making it as delicious as possible to make me eat as much as possible. Like, that's probably not a moral good. But we devote tremendous resources to these things. And I don't know how to square it.
Yeah, this is the problem with decentralized decision making, right? They are being perfectly rational because you keep buying.
Yeah, I try not to, but yeah, they're delicious, aren't they? There's a team of scientists making sure they are.
Yeah.
As cheaply made as possible while being as delicious as possible. And the same goes for entertainment and for consumer products. And there's industries of consumption that don't necessarily lead to positive outcomes, but are incredibly well developed and use an incredible amount of talent.
What is something about the world that surprises you?
Oh. I think I'm surprised that there isn't. So I'm surprised that there isn't like a sort of a selection of humans who are just better and organize things. So I think I always thought this growing, as a child and even as a young adult, that there was some sort of subspecies of humans who were at the top of all organizations and kind of just made them work. But now I realize that that there isn't really. And that's nothing. I should add that this is absolutely not. This is not a reflection of my current situation or anything like that. I mean, actually, quite the opposite. I think DeepMind is, of all the organizations I've operated in, it's incredibly really well organized and really superbly run. But I've had lots of experiences of other organizations and just governments and things like that. And I think that surprised me that that actually these people are just like you and probably often even more inept. And they and somehow the world still works. At least it works, for a lot of people. But then, of course, for a lot of people, it doesn't work. So anyway, I just found, I think I had this naive. I think a lot of the other thing was that I think it's part of my parents' attitude, which comes out of this Western European post-war attitude, and actually US would have had this as well, which is that things were just generally getting more correct and more right and more organized, and the world was getting sorted out as time passes from the Second World War. And of course, at some point in the early 2000s, or whenever it was, this kind of, for the West, for people born in these countries, we started to learn that this was just not the case. And then lots of things happened in the last 5 years that really confirmed that that's not the case.
Yeah, I think there's a coming of age moment when you realize that the adults are making it up as they go along, that there are no grown-ups in charge, that we are the grown-ups.
Yeah.
What is something about the world that surprises you?
That we don't collaborate even more. I find it so surprising that given what we know about how biology works, about science, about the world, that we are not one country. Humanity has not been able to come together. That I find very surprising. Yes, I mean, maybe earlier, like if you believe in certain dogmas about religion, then or that one country is better than another country and so on. But but now with our shared understanding of our origins, it feels quite it's very strange that we have not been able to come together as one entity. And we still have all these different divisions in terms of cultural identity and nationalities and religions and so on. That I find it very fascinating and surprising.
So a cynical read of the history of the world would suggest that we tend to come together when we can come together against something. That a unifying force, unfortunately for humanity, is their shared either their shared opposition to something or shared defense against something. And so one sort of hypothesis is the day we get attacked by another species, interplanetary species, is the day humanity will discover that perhaps nation states and boundaries are not that important.
Yeah, maybe it would take that, right? But like if you think about SARS-CoV-2, like COVID, I mean, it's a shared challenge. And are we coming together against that shared challenge? It affects all of humanity together, but I mean, it's arguable that yes, there are certain elements, like if you look at how the scientific community reacted and how much collaboration there was across, I mean, like it was amazing to see across countries, across sort of academic and industrial institutions, there was amazing amount of collaboration, and that's great. But why don't we just do it all the time? Why does it take like COVID for us to do this, work together? But let's just accelerate science all the time. And in terms of a shared challenge, understanding nature, we have very limited understanding of how even our bodies work. We know better, we might know much better than how a car works and so on. And we get worried, oh, my car is not going to function, but we have absolutely no idea about the real sort of understanding of how, like in detail, what are the causal mechanisms that guide life, right? How does aging works? How does biology generally works? And how does nature work? And that is a sort of thing that we can all sort of come together to understand. And I find it very interesting that people worry about like this being a zero-sum game, right? If somebody wins, somebody loses, and so on. But this is understanding of nature is something that we can all sort of win against. We don't necessarily need an adversary. We just need a shared mission. And I feel that somehow we have not been able to come to consensus on a shared mission. We still sort of are driven by our biological sort of needs and habits, and have not been able to sort of overcome those in the pursuit of something more unified and global.
Yeah. What is one thing about the world that surprises you?
Time and again, it seems that human intelligence is weird. Half of the country believe the vaccine or COVID itself is questionable, and I mean,
half may be a bit high of the figure, though, right? Like it's a surprisingly large percentage that.
Yeah. I'm exaggerating. Yeah. But what I meant to say is that I see that there are a lot of cognitive dissonance in people that surprise me, and even for, let's just say, diversity, support of diversity, everybody proclaims that they support, but then their acts may or may not be in line with that. They might be perfectly be okay to say certain things that actually have an implication that reveal that they actually believe otherwise. But even when somebody pointed that out, they may not. It may be more important for them to argue back that there's nothing wrong with what they said, or. So I found that a lot of those cases quite interesting. That people could have like two different beliefs simultaneously in their mind.
Yeah, cognitive dissonance, and you know, Kevin Simler has a book called The Elephant in the Brain, which is about which is about the ways in which we not only put on a mask for external entities, but also internally. There are beliefs that you hide from yourselves, and it's because it gives your brain an advantage at not consciously being aware that it's holding conflicting beliefs in it.
Oh yeah, there's also this book about self-deception by Robert Trevor, or I cannot read somewhere in there, but The Folly of Fools. That's the title.